Hello and welcome to Historical Costuming 391. Today I'm going to try and cover the factors to consider before you even start cutting out or purchasing your fabric even to make your outfit to wear to a Renaissance fair. There are basically 4 or 5 things that you want to keep in mind. Obviously, cost, which is going to depend on whether you buy top-of-the-line silks, wools, linens, which for a working class outfit or even middle class, you won't need so much more wool and linen than silk for certain. The climate you'll be wearing it in, a lot of Renaissance fairs are held in the summer. It can be very warm. So if you're wearing it on a 90-degree day, 90% humidity, it's going to need cleaning. Therefore, how easily cleaned is this going to be? Silk obviously is more a problem. Wool you don't want to throw in the washer, possibly could hand wash it, but otherwise it goes to the dry cleaners. Linen is a workhorse. You can wash it, no problems. Although, did you pre-shrink it before you cut it out? If you didn't, it can shrink up to 1/3. Cottons are the same way. Also, the function. What are you going to be doing in this outfit? If you're simply going to be walking around at a Renaissance fair, you do want to be comfortable. You don't want to pass out from heat stroke, but at the same time, you're not in the situation somebody is who's a performer, someone who's dancing, any vigorous activity where you need to be able to move. Good case in point, although it's outside of our time period, would be the cast of Hamilton. Those people are moving in those outfits, and if you look at the fabrics they're made from, they're not what would have been used necessarily in that time period, but at the same time, they work because the actor needs to do what they do in them as far as the purpose of the play. Myself, I often at historic events am doing a side saddle demonstration. Therefore, horses love to get things dirty. I need something that can be easily cleaned. That and the fact that it's summer, I tend to avoid wool as much as I would like to use it. Lastly, do you have space for this? I live in a 150-year-old farmhouse that has almost no closet space. However, I do have a spare bedroom, and it's getting pretty full. So keep all these factors in mind. Also, just remember, as soon as you are in costume, you are on stage. Even if you're not a paid performer, you're going to attract some attention. Therefore, let's try and do this to the best degree we can and have an outfit we can be proud of. Having said that, you're looking at a time period when clothes very much advertised one's social position. Elizabethan England had a pretty rigid hierarchy. They even passed what were called sumptuary laws to try and quote unquote keep people in their place. Of course, the minute they were passed, everyone set out to break them. The worst you could do probably was end up paying a fine for wearing velvet when you class-wise had no right to. But clothing at that point in time was very, very costly compared to today's throw it, wear it attitude. We sadly toss approximately 11 million tons of clothing per year in the landfill. That's the fast fashion attitude. Back then, it was wear it till it wore out. If you were upper class and it went out of fashion, you could sell it or give it away, usually to your servants or a family member who was next person below you in social status. The used clothing market, you would sometimes find clothing as much as 50 years old, so very out of fashion. But because it was all handmade, someone had to shear that sheep, card that wool, spin that wool, dye that wool, weave that wool before you even took it to a tailor to have it made. It was very sturdy and it held its value, but it also was more expensive than today's fabrics by a long shot. So, having said that, just a good case in point before I go on to my next point. The Earl of Leicester, who was one of Queen Elizabeth's favorites, spent more money on one outfit than Shakespeare spent on his house in Stratford-on-Avon. Clothing back then was that expensive. Almost the equivalent today of buying a car versus going to Walmart, wherever you would go to buy just a t-shirt, shorts, something like that. It wasn't an impulse purchase. It was something you saved up for. Another thing to consider as far as if you've got a situation where you don't have central heating, and again today most houses do, what you put on in the morning you're probably going to wear all day, whether you're inside or out. My husband was British. His parents' house in the north of England, believe me, did not have central heating. So that was another factor. People did not change in and out of layers of clothing as much as we do today. All of this, of course, is something you're not going to deal with at the average Renaissance fair. You'll probably want to take off layers. So let's not have too many, at least for our initial project. We're going to keep it relatively simple. Having said that, where normally you would want to wear linen as an undergarment, if you can't find it, my recommendation would be cotton, maybe a lighter weight gauzy cotton, preferably not the crinkle cottons. But to start with, we're going to build our outfit, which is what you want to do for an historical costume. You want to build it from the skin out. We're going to be starting with a chemise, and then we're going to go to a corded petticoat. So if you pick a lighter weight cotton for your chemise, please don't use a polycotton blend. They have their places, linings, that kind of thing if you want to use it, but they just don't hang right, they don't drape correctly for the time period. The corded petticoat is not going to be seen. For that, I'm going to be using heavier weight muslin, but for the chemise, it conceivably is going to be seen around your neckline and the sleeves if you're wearing a sleeveless bodice. And that's something that ideally you want to put as much correct decision into in picking your fabric versus the muslin that's not going to show underneath. Another thing to consider, of course, washability, shrinkage. With cotton, I would wash it in hot water first, let it shrink as much as it's going to, then cut your garment out. You don't want to wear it, get it dirty, throw it in the hot soapy wash water and find out that it's 3 or 4 inches shorter than when you started. Anything that you're going to wear underneath any kind of undergarment is much more forgiving. If you do make a mistake, don't stress over it. Let's learn and make our mistakes on the undergarments before we start with the outer garments. Now, as far as resources go, there are several good books. If you want to buy just one, or if you don't want to purchase it, go to your local public library. The number for the historic costuming section is 391, and see if they've got any of these books. If not, any public library in the country just about will order books for you through interlibrary loan. The first one I could recommend to anybody who's interested in Elizabethan costuming is Tudor Taylor. These people really know their stuff. It's a UK publication. They've done a lot of research. They're coming out with another one called The Typical Tudor. They've also done one already called The Tudor Child. They cover types of fabric, different wools, silks, the different names for them, the different colors, and again, we're looking at a time period when it was only natural dyes that were available. You don't have a lot of vibrant, bright colors like neon greens or yellows that you would find today at a fabric store. Stay away from those. But if you look at their page, and they have a lovely color chart. If you look at their page on color, and then they've got 2 pages of definitions, fabric terms that were used back in the Elizabethan era, that most of them you either don't hear today, or case in point, broadcloth. Today, that's cotton. In the Elizabethan era, it would have been a type of wool actually relatively popular with working class, middle class. For the upper classes, it would have been used more as a lining. Again, you're after warmth more than anything else. At that time, England was going through, well, all of Northern Europe really, was going through what they called the Little Ice Age. The Middle Ages had been relatively mild and warm. Suddenly, the climate was starting to get cooler. In fact, during Elizabeth's reign, the Thames actually froze over a couple times to the point where they could have what they called frost fairs, and you could ice skate on it. Today, of course, we're looking at the opposite problem. So if you look at a lot of portraits from that time period, typical and the probably main signature look of the Elizabethan era was a square neckline. Some of those portraits, you can see hairs from fur peeking up at the edge of the bodice. Some of those clothes were actually lined with fur to stay warm. So they were dealing with an entirely different climate issue than we are today. If you want more information than what this book offers, I can highly recommend, and if you can get it through interlibrary loan, please send the library you get it from a note of thanks. This is a rather expensive book. This is by Janet Arnold. She was a costume historian. She has, I believe, a series of 5 books. The last one, I think, was published posthumously. And she looked at existing garments, graphed them up, and basically gives you all the background information as far as the history of the garment, what it's made from, linings, interlinings, boning, that kind of thing. It's a costumer's Bible. I was a history major in school, and you always, as an historian, want to look at primary sources if you possibly can. This is as close as you can get. Her other books cover just women's costume. This one, because there are so few extant garments from the 16th century, and it's luck of the draw as far as what survived, it also includes men's garments, which is great. Like I said, the other books don't. But this is a costumer's Bible. She covers up through, I believe, the 1930s altogether in her volumes. So if you really want to delve into costume history, you want to look at her books. The next one, and this one tends to take what I might call a more practical, really more realistic approach in some respects. Jean Honeysett has costumed a lot of BBC productions and stage productions in general. She's very good. She knows her stuff, but she also has to make it work on stage. And of course, if she's working with a producer and a director, she has to stay on budget. So she talks about compromises you can make, what shortcuts you can take, what fabrics hold up well to a lot of washing, which is something you're going to keep in mind after you've worn your outfit on a hot summer day at a Renaissance fair. Lastly, this is a book that I bought years ago at the Southern California Renaissance Fair. It's not bad. It's written by 2 costumers. However, it does make a lot of compromises, not 100% accurate. The other books strive more for accuracy than this. But if you can get hold of a copy, it's not as expensive, and the others are probably going to be a little bit harder to find depending on your budget. So it's well worth taking a look at. It'll give you some good ideas and tends to be very practical, again, in its approach and the compromises you can make. The last book, which is just eye candy, this came out not too long ago, published by this, or put out by the Smithsonian, published by Darling Kindersley Press. This is just fun to look at. It covers the whole swath of costuming history, basically from almost Neanderthals to pretty much almost present day. It's been a decade or 2 since it came out. But it's fun just to sit down and look through lots of ideas and inspiration. So having said that, and there are other books out there too. These are just what are available either from my library or my local public library. Don't limit yourself to these, but if you do want more background information, these are a good place to start. Now, websites. Far and above any of the others, my favorite is the Elizabethan Costuming page. It's wonderful. She has, among other things, a corset pattern generator and a chemise generator where you just plug in your measurements and it will graph out the pattern for you. You will have to graph it up, but at least you know at the end it's going to fit you. It's going to be the right size. She's got information on Italian Renaissance, Spanish Renaissance, German Renaissance, Flanders, any of the other countries that were prominent at the time. So if you've got any kind of curiosity about what's out there on the web, start there. You probably won't go to anything else, at least not for a while. If you're looking for fabric, accessories, patterns, again, Tudor Tailor, they have a website. It's great. I don't know when their book, Typical Tudor, which is more on the working class clothing, I don't know for sure when that's going to come out. It was supposed to come out last year, but COVID kind of upset those plans. Hopefully it will be released this year. I'm sure it will be just as good as the other one, if not better. But as I said, they carry a lot of fabric, accessories you're not going to find anyplace else. The fabric will be correct for the period. They know their stuff. You'll be dealing with the exchange rate from pounds to dollars, but that's no big deal. You can get through that. Finally, down to the nitty-gritty, patterns. What are we going to use? This one, which has been dubbed the Shakespeare in Love pattern, is not bad. The problem you're going to run into with most of what you would call the big four, which is Vogue, Butterwick, Simplicity, and McCall's, is they're cut for modern bodies, not wearing a period undergarment, which shapes the body and gives you the proper silhouette to begin with, they have, in most cases, too much ease. I've almost never been able to use one of these patterns because I'm a very small size. I'm at best a 4, sometimes a 2. And a lot of these patterns will have up to 5 inches ease. So I just can't wear them. They're too big. Even if I try to adjust it down, it's pain. I'd rather start with something that's closer to fitting me. However, this pattern, if you can get hold of a copy, isn't too bad. There are some corrections that would need to be made. If you have a copy, let me know. I'll explain what needs to be done. The next thing, again, it was simplicity. They did put out a nice pattern for undergarments for the time period. This pattern and this one will eliminate most of the ease that you typically find in most of the other costume patterns. The others, if you want a nice Halloween costume, you'll get one, but unless you really know what you're doing, you're not going to get a period correct outfit, and you're going to spend a lot of time, do a lot of hair pulling, and possibly waste some expensive fabric. So learn from my mistakes and start from the beginning with something you can count on. In all the patterns I've looked at, far and away, the best ones I've found are Margot Anderson's. I did contact her to ask her if I could use her patterns for this series. She said yes, very graciously. I have no financial connection to her company or anything else. They're just very good patterns. She gives you the historical background, an incredible size range from I think 2 to 22, so you shouldn't have any problems there. I still recommend doing a mock-up in muslin, an old bed sheet, go to the thrift store, find a piece of fabric that obviously nobody's going to want to use for anything else, and cut it out of that first based on your measurements. Make the necessary adjustments and go from there. But her patterns are well laid out, they fit well, and I really can't recommend them highly enough. These you can get occasionally on sale at places like Joann's, maybe $1, $2, depending, up to $5. But if you don't get it on sale, it'll cost you almost as much as this. So I would just spend the money on this to begin with and get something that's going to really work. Having said that, take a look also at films. Wolf Hall, if you want to see working class costumes, is very good. Those costumes obviously are made from wool. I don't remember who the costumer was on that series, but they did a good job. Of course, they're upper class costumes also. Shakespeare in Love is just plain fun. Watch it anytime you want to, but as far as correctness, there are some things that aren't quite right, but again, overall nice job, lots of color, beautiful fabrics, and fun. Next segment, we'll begin actually cutting out. So do your research. Decide which pattern you want to use, get some fabric, try out the fit, and we'll be ready to go. See you soon.